Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Richard and welcome back to a stock market outlook video sponsored by MarketSmith. And I hope you guys are having a great start to your weekend. And in this video, we'll talk about the market indexes, leading stocks, earnings gap ups and gap downs. Then we'll move on to my focus list, how it performed this past week, sentiment from a few different sources, the IBD Big Picture article, and finally the GMI Signal from richardlmoglen.com. And if you do enjoy my analysis, please take the time down below to leave me a like. Let me know in the comment section what you thought about the market last week, and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one every single week. So starting things off, let's take a look at the NASDAQ Composite in MarketSmith. And we did make fresh all-time highs on this Thursday. Definitely bullish action, and then had a nice inside day on lower volume, below average volume to end out the week. And it's all started with a really nice move up off the 21 EMA on the 3rd this Tuesday. So overall, this index looks good. We're above a rising 21 and 50 SMA, but also not too extended from either one of those key moving averages. And we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. Looking at the S&P 500, this looks pretty similar at this point. We also moved up this week after a nice move up on this Tuesday right here. It looks like a bullish outside day, taking out both the low and high of Monday's range. And then we closed the week right at all-time highs. Definitely bullish action, although it is on lower volumes. So we are kind of wedging upwards here, but we'll see what happens. We are in a beautiful, strong uptrend above a rising 21 and 50 SMA. And taking a look at small cap growth, you can see we did retake the 300 level here and close above it, which is bullish, but we did have a bit of a downside reversal on this Friday. The closing range wasn't quite in the upper half, and it's right on the 50 SMA, the red line here. And ideally next week, we have a definitive move up from this kind of mini consolidation here towards the 315.48 pivot. And this consolidation is on lower volume, but it's not super tight action. So we'll see what happens next week. But I think if this really gets going, it challenges this pivot and moves towards all-time highs, that'd be very promising for growth stocks in general. Looking at smaller caps as a whole, the Russell 2000 ETF, this looks pretty similar, trapped below the 50 SMA for the meantime, and it's also forming a little bit of a consolidation here on not the largest volume here. So once again, I want to see this break above the 50 SMA, which has been a resistance the previous few weeks, and start to trend towards these all-time highs and break out of this stage 2 flat base. Looking at the FFTY, the Innovator IBD 50 ETF, this looks pretty similar, but is right near these pivots, which is promising. And if it can break through this line, that would be a very good sign for growth stocks. But once again, we did have a little bit of a downside reversal and not a great close to end out the week. All you can see, it's on pretty low volume compared to the previous moves up on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And also taking a look at some strong earnings breakouts. We had a few this week. D-Dog was on my radar, but I didn't trade this one. Looks very strong. I'll be watching for a pullback, some structure to develop, and basically tight price action on low volume. That would be my clue to start looking for an entry, maybe on strength or on a pullback. But this earnings breakout was the largest volume since the base. Looks pretty strong, but it's not the highest volume in over a year. So ideally, I did want to see we break above these share marks here, 28.8 million. This is only about, not even 13.7. So we'll have to see how this acts. But overall, a good closing range here, and then it acted really nicely on this Friday when a lot of growth stocks got hit reasonably hard, although on lower volume. We also had SITM, was another one I was watching here. Semiconductors have been very strong. AMD has been acting great. NVIDIA was a previous leader. And this has really fantastic annual EPS estimates, and the estimate revisions are up. But just looking at the price and volume action, it broke out to all-time highs on huge volume, although once again, not the highest within the past 12 months, and then acted really strongly right here on this Friday with another inside day. However, we did have some prior growth leaders getting hit. Fiverr is back towards the bottom of this base here and didn't hold the high volume close on this Friday, and this drop was on very high volume. Looks like the highest volume in quite some time, the highest volume on this chart at this time frame. So doesn't look too great. We'll see how it acts, but for me, this is really a no touch until it acts well. We did have some promising action from EXPI, which is a real estate company, and this is the highest volume in over a year, and definitely a change in character since it's been basing and pulling back for quite a while. Now this decline is much higher than I usually would like to be looking at. It went from basically 90.26 down to 22.52. So more than it might be a 75% drop here. And I was trading it back in here, had some nice trades in here. But this highest volume in a year means something has changed with the business. And you've got really strong annual EPS estimates, great quarterly earnings growth as well. And let's show the fund ownership just quickly here to see what that looks like. So you've got a nice increase over the past few years, but no high quality funds. So we'll see what happens. But this could be a changing character. I'll be watching this one a little bit. Let me know down below in the comments any other really prominent earnings gap ups or gap downs that I missed. And I'll basically give my analysis, give my take down below in the comment section. But moving on, let's go ahead and move over to TC 2000 and take a look at the leaders list. All right, so sorting by the weekly change, we'll go through all of these different charts right here. D-Dog, we talked about really strong action and a high closing range, but not the highest volume in over a year, although definitely some very significant volume. Looks about 3-4 times the 50-day moving average. SPT, also a nice breakout on volume, looks pretty strong, holding up well on this Friday as well. Definitely short-term extended, but a very strong breakout through these pivots into all-time highs. Moderna has been an incredibly strong stock. Just when you think it's done, it continues to go on, and it formed a little bit of a tight consolidation here and then broke out through this high on reasonably high volume. But once again, this is a super strong move, but we did have a downside reversal bar on this Thursday and an undercut and then an upside reversal on this Friday. But this is not really a stock that I'm looking to go long at this point because I'm trying to catch this trend before it ends up being this extended. And right now, it's pretty far from a prior consolidation, prior base. BNTX as well, very short-term extended, but if you caught this near the 50 SMA and this DTL break, it was a super powerful move. Great action on this Wednesday, but once again, pretty far from the prior consolidation, prior base. So we'll see if this ends up being the top, who knows, but it's acting pretty well on this Thursday and Friday, although it is potentially high volume without further price increase on this Thursday and Friday. We'll just have to see what happens, but pretty good closing ranges on both of these days, still riding above the 10-day simple moving average. LC, another recent earnings gap up that's acting very well, breaking out of this base and moving on towards all-time highs, and then basically going quiet on Thursday and Friday on below average volume, while all these up days are on pretty above average volume. FIGS found support right at the pivot right here and had a nice tight consolidation a little bit here and then a nice breakout on this Thursday and a good closing range on this Friday. Even though it was down, it recovered nicely off the lows. C Limited also had a nice breakout and nice inside day, good price action on this Friday, and we'll see what happens here. This is a later stage base. I believe it's a stage 3 and a little bit whippy action here near the pivot. So I would like to see some tightness, and we'll see if this just takes off or if it needs a retest of this pivot once again, and some more tight action needs to develop before it really takes off into another strong uptrend like it had in 2020. ASAN also kind of wedging up on below average volume, but it had a nice move on this Friday, or actually on this Thursday, and then a nice inside day to end out the week on Friday, but not the greatest closing range here. So we'll see what happens. I would like to see a pullback, some type of tight price action. Like this looked a lot healthier to me than what it's currently doing, kind of wedging up along the 10-day on a below average volume. I would like to see some pullback to the 21 EMA, then a strong move upwards on volume. Domo also broke out on this Thursday. Once again, nice action on Friday as well. And this looks a little bit better than ASAN because it's pretty much going sideways instead of drifting higher. And we'll see what happens with this stock. I would like to see that this push up, be on higher volume, but we'll see if that comes in next week. AMD continues to trend really nicely here. And I sold half my shares on this day around 119 or so. And I tried an oops reversal as I moved back through this low on this Friday, but ultimately got stopped out on that quarter position that I tried to add back into my position. But at this point, with the remaining half, what I'm looking for is basically some structure to form above the 10-day simple and then a continued move up towards all-time highs. But if we have a definitive close on high volume below the 10-day, I'll just take off that last half position. I've gotten a nice trade out of this stock. But overall, semiconductors look strong, and NVIDIA also had a move up this week, although on lower volume. And this bar is pretty crazy action here. It doesn't look great. And we'll see if this forms out a base right below the 209, 210 level. Team also had an earnings gap up, not the greatest action here, and kind of wedging up higher here. We'll see if this pulls back towards the low here in the high volume close, or if this manages to take out this high and move up from this point. But I think my bet is on a retest of this high volume close or even the low right here. Dash looks pretty good and setting up for next week before earnings on the 12th. But overall, a nice upside reversal on this Monday, and then going quiet and tight on Thursday and Friday against the 21 EMA below these pivots as well. CrowdStrike pulling back to the pivot once again a little bit on this Friday. Nice action on this Monday, start the week. Nice closing range off the 50-day, 10-week area. And this move up was on low volume, but it's still just going quiet, kind of within this range from 270 back towards the pivot at around 250. Snap moved up on this Wednesday and this Thursday. Downside reversal here on this Friday, but holding above the 10-day here. I don't like this action, but it was on lower volume. So we'll see if this continues to frustrate a lot of people, go sideways for the next few weeks, or next week it finally takes off through this high and high volume close. Crocs also moving up after an earnings gap up above the 10-day, looks pretty good. Zscaler just riding that 10-day to higher prices on lower volume. FRHC moving off the 21 EMA here after a pullback towards the pivot. But it is on lower volume, so another stock kind of wedging up on decreased volume. Shopify pulling back to the pivot here, and that is at about the 1500 level. And this drop is on above average volume, which I don't like, but so far it's going quiet, at least on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of this week on below average volume. DocuSign also had a little bit of a move up on this Wednesday and Thursday, but it was on below average volume. But a nice retest of the pivot once again, and we'll see if this continues to go sideways or if it finally manages to find the demand and move up towards higher prices. CMG trending beautifully after an earnings gap up, a lot of demand coming into this stock, but right now it is wedging up on below average volume, so I would expect some type of consolidation sometime soon, maybe pull back to the 10-day or even a pause and just letting the 21 EMA catch back up to price. S still just oscillating back and forth. This looks really whippy, hard to trade at this point. OLO really kind of tightening up a little bit right here. Nice upside reversal on this Friday, right against the prior IPO-based pivot. Dexcom also going sideways and flagging nicely after this strong earnings gap up here. But once again, this volume wasn't the highest within the past 12 months, but did break out of a nice 11-month base. Tesla had a nice move up early in the week, but then finished off the week after kind of wedging up a little bit, failing here and breaking below all three lows at the same time. Definitely a little bit of a warning sign, but it is pulling back right to this pivot, so we'll see how it acts next week. Net also pretty much going sideways. This was earnings right here, nice oops reversal, but not the strongest closing range, and there's just not that much volume coming in at this point, which is kind of what it's like in summer trading at this point. There's not too much demand coming into these stocks, these growth names, but overall decent action after it was down after hours, and it pulled back all the way towards the 21 EMA level. Twilio just pulling back here after an earnings gap down on earnings, still basing at this point. GNRC broke out of a little bit of a short-term range here, double inside days. Not too much demand on this gap up, and not a great closing range as it found resistance at the 21 and 10-day simple. Bill going sideways, moving below these lows on this Friday, although it is on below average volume. GLBE moved up on Wednesday and Thursday. Then I believe it had earnings and gave it all back on this Friday. EMPH was looking promising, but you can see on this bar, there's not a lot of demand here as it squatted. Then it had an inside day and then an inside day and down. Definitely a warning sign if I'm long at this point. But looking at this stock, you can see it's pulling back right towards the 21 EMA. So I'll be watching to see if it tightens up and forms a little bit of a cup with handle within this overall consolidation. AMEH, I'll probably be taking it off this list. It looks like it's headed back towards the 50 SMA. And you can see that it has a little bit of a pattern of a breakdown, 2 inside days, or a little bit of a consolidation, then another breakdown with a poor closing range. So we'll see what happens here if it forms a longer term base. Roku reported earnings and is still pulling back here. It did have a little bit of demand showing here on this Thursday, moving back through the 50 SMA, but a downside reversal on this Friday. MTCH also had a gap down and is back below the 200-day moving average. Doesn't look great. Docs also failing at the IPO-based pivot. And lastly, we've got Fiverr, which had that earnings gap down. So that's a run through of these leading stocks. Let me know down below, what are your thoughts about the way these stocks are acting? A lot of them, for the most part, are going sideways right near all-time highs, some wedging up on lower volume, and we'll see how they act next week. And before we move on to my focus list, I also want to talk about SQ, which I'll be adding to this list right now. This had a nice move up on this Monday, went quiet for 2 days, and another move up, and then an inside day on Friday. This looks pretty good. And I'll be watching to see if this can tighten up once again and be looking for a way in to the stock, because I really like the demand coming in on this bar with a nice closing range. And it looks like the highest volume in over 12 months. So we'll see how this acts next week. And now let's move on to my focus list and sort by that weekly change. So overall, if we sort by that column right here, SI was the top performer. A nice move up after an upside reversal, 2-2 reversal on this day, then fall through and 3-bar break on Thursday, and then nice end to the week above this pivot. So we'll see how this acts, if it can overcome the overhead supply and break above 118, which has been resistance up to this point as it tries to form up the right side of this base. Coin also moving up nicely on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. You can see there's a little bit of demand for the crypto-related stocks at this point. Looks pretty decent, but it does have a significant test at 261, which it failed so far on this Friday. And there is the IPO anchored VWAP from that first day to deal with as well. LC just trending higher. We talked about that. Snow tried to break out here and didn't act too well on this Wednesday, gapping down. And I had started a position here, added a little bit on this day as it moved up. And then I ultimately actually sold my entire position because I didn't like how it's acting, and I can always re-enter at this point. But decent closing range on Thursday and Friday. So I'll be watching this next week for an entry. NVIDIA, we talked about wedging upward here a little bit on lower volume. Dash, we talked about as well. Crowd, Snap, we covered. CRCT looks pretty well set up for next week. You've got some pivots here, as well as potential resistance at 39.41. TDD pulling back right above the pivot. I believe there's earnings next week on the 9th. Roblox showed some demand right near the pivot, but had an inside day and then an ugly 3-bar to the downside on this Friday, downside reversal as well. Doku we talked about, Dexcom we covered, and EMPH we covered as well. So overall, the crypto-related stocks were our best performers this week. And make sure you guys tune in tomorrow on Sunday for my next list of ideas. And now moving on to sentiment, we had an increase in bullishness in my Twitter surveys from 37.2% to now 43.2%. Not terribly high, but this is heading in the wrong direction. So I'll be watching this pretty carefully. Looking at the NAAIM exposure index, we increased to 97.72, which is historically pretty high. So this is a little bit of a caution sign for me. Once again, as always, these are completely secondary indicators. And for me, what's much more important is how my trades are acting, how my stocks are acting, how the market leaders are doing, and the overall indexes. All that comes before secondary indicators like sentiment. But moving on to the put call ratio, this is still right near 0.6. It's just been oscillating back and forth. And looking at the bulls versus bears poll, it's increasing a little bit, but still lower than at 60 level, which is a good sign. And with that, sentiment is moving in a little bit in the wrong direction here, especially the NAAIM exposure index. But overall, once again, the market leaders, the market indexes, that's much more important for my kind of analysis of the market than the secondary indicators. So moving on, let's talk about the IBD Big Picture article, and the headline is Stock Market Ends Week Mixed After Jobs Report as Treasury Yields Jump. So they discussed the stronger than expected jobs report, where we added 943,000 jobs, and the overall jobless rate fell down to 5.4%. But the 10-year Treasury yield jumped to 1.29%, the highest in more than 3 weeks. They discussed the indexes here, the FFTY down 0.9%, IPR jumped 5.3%. And they discuss AMD, Roku down here as well. And they also mention or basically reemphasize that the distribution day count remains at an elevated level. So keep that in mind. They discuss Tesla, Melly down here. And overall, their current outlook is a confirmed uptrend, but we do have 7 distribution days on the S&P 500 and 5 on the NASDAQ, which is definitely getting up there. So I'll be watching very carefully to see where we go from here, whether we break out and some of these fall off based on time or gains since them, or this starts to really matter and we see some distribution hit those growth stock leaders. So lastly, we've got the GMI Signal from shortball.com, which is still green since May 26th. And on Friday, the GMI score was a strong 6 out of 6. It's currently day 50 of a QQQ short-term uptrend, which is getting a little bit long in the tooth, but we had a bunch of stocks and the IBD index having green line breakouts, DDOG, ZI, SITM. You can see that from the charts down here. So overall, my current view is a confirmed uptrend, but we are wedging up on low volume on many of these growth stock leaders. So I think where we go from here is very important. Whether we break out on volume and see some demand come in, that would be a bullish sign. But if we start to break those pivots and moving averages, that would definitely get me bearish pretty quickly. And that name exposure index level, that gets me a little bit cautious as well. So we'll see what happens. We don't have to predict. We just have to interpret the current action that we're seeing right here. And at this moment, my current view is a confirmed uptrend as we're above all those key moving averages, the 21 EMA and the 50 SMA. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like down below and subscribe if you're new. I'll see you guys in future videos.